Right, welcome back to After Dark. I'm Nic Pegg. This is the last segment for the evening, and it's my pleasure to welcome Kirsty Everett onto the programme from Comics Compulsion. Good evening, Kirsty.
Evening.
Comics, have they been challenged by the online world, or do they still hold it? Are they still holding their own?
Yeah, they're very much holding their own. We've found that a lot of people like to read comics online and then they prefer the physical version. Everyone always goes back to a book. So we have people come in who say, I read such and such online and I'd like the physical copy. And so it's really nice to see that turn around.
Oh, that's interesting. So they're finding out about characters or stories that they like online or a type of comic, and then they're actually coming to you for the real thing.
Yeah, that's right.
Are comics published as they always used to be, or like in a kind of paper form, or are they coming out in book form, or how are people getting their comics these days?
Yeah, so they come out in individual issues, just in the paper form, usually about 20 to 30 pages. And then what the publishers do is once they've got about 5 or 6 comics, they put them all together and they create a book, which they call a graphic novel.
Ah, right. Okay. So are they hardback or?
They come in both soft copy and hard copy.
Now, we've just had a picture up of some comics on the rack there. Are they about an A4 magazine size, most of them?
I think they're a little bit smaller than A4.
Oh, okay. Because I remember, I mean, back in the 60s when I was a kid, they used to have, there were lots of comics, you know, Dennis the Menace and the Bash
Yeah.
Street Kids and all sorts of things. Now, have any of those really old titles survived, or did they all sort of fall by the wayside?
Some of them have survived. A common one is Archie.
Archie. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Archie was originally a comic in the 70s and 80s, died down for a wee bit, and then they brought the TV show, Archie. And so comics made a huge comeback with Archie from that TV show.
Now, there's always been a lot of interest in horror films and the grotesque and gothic culture. Is this very well represented in the world of comics?
Some of them are. The Boys is definitely one of them. It's a graphic novel that's been turned into I think it's a Amazon Prime show at the moment. And I've read the graphic novel and I've started watching the season. It's quite a brutal one. So there are some graphic novels that do follow along that horror line.
I'm wondering if there's much crossover between the world of comics as originator and then some of the gaming online that people do, because there seems to be, because it's a very visual medium, obviously both of them are. Are there examples of that you can think of?
There aren't a huge amount of comics that have become games. There's only a couple that I can think of. There was a World of Warcraft comic series in the early 2000s. So that is also a computer game. But there isn't a lot of electronic games, if you like, that are also comics.
Okay. Do you have to... I'm thinking about censorship actually and age advisories. Are there some comics which are of a very adult nature and you have to sort of like display separately to the main body of work?
So a lot of the graphic novels have a wee rating on them, so they might have teen plus or all ages or M. In the comic world, it's not as strict as other ratings. But what we do is we are very family orientated. So we base what we sell off who's buying it. So if a kid comes up and grabs The Boys, for example, which, as I said earlier, was really graphic. If a kid came up and said, I want to buy this, by law, we could sell it. But we know morally and ethically that's not okay. So we would suggest something else for them.
Oh, good on you, because that is important, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
What first attracted you to comics?
I love getting lost in a different world. Now, our world is lovely, but picking up a book and reading about different characters and different settings. I very much love fantasy. So I read a lot of fantasy graphic novels and comics. And just getting lost in that world and imagining yourself as one of the characters or seeing yourself in one of those characters. It's really cool.
I'm thinking about the superhero comics, the Marvel characters. Have they survived? I mean, or did the big movies, like Superman series, did they revive interest in those characters, but as comics?
Yeah, so the movies have definitely kept the superhero comics going. People generally watch a movie in the cinema and they want to read more about the character. They want to learn the background about the character. And so they come in and see us and they're like, hey, we just saw this Spider-Man movie. Do you have anything on like how Spider-Man became Spider-Man? And so then we'd direct them towards some reading material that would tell them a bit about how that character became who they are now.
Is the comic store a bit like going to Penny Lane Records, where you've got some new comics, but quite a lot of second-hand ones, pre-loved comics? Do you deal in those as well?
Yes, we definitely have some second-hand comics. Because we're the only comic book shop in Christchurch, we do have a lot of second-hand ones that we've purchased off other people. We do have a lot of new comics and older comics that are still new. So we might have comics from 2000s, but we purchased it in the 2000s. So it was new at the time, and we will still have it.
Do they have much of a comics section at the library?
They might do. I think the library does have... I know libraries have some graphic novels, but I'm not sure about comics.
What about the price range of the comics at your store?
Yeah, so comics start around $10. And you can get some really old comics that are worth 50 or hundreds of dollars. We don't hold a lot of those ones, but we do have a few old, rare ones too.
Is that because that some of them are collector's items and people want to, collect them?
Yeah, that's right.
How about yourself? Do you have a private collection at home?
I have a few graphic novels, but I don't have any of the collector's, expensive ones.
Now, before we forget, and we're not finished yet, but tell us where your business is.
Yeah, so we're at 58 Main North Road in Papanui. We're opposite Northlands Mall. They put in a pedestrian light recently, and it goes, if you cross the street using the pedestrian crossing, we're right there.
How long have you been there?
We've been in this location since about 2011. We were in town beforehand, but the earthquakes meant that we had to leave.
Oh no, that must have been a terrible... did you lose much stock, or was it did we able to move out cleanly from your old premises?
Yeah, so during the earthquakes, I didn't own it at that point. Myself and my partner, Logan, we purchased Comics Compulsion in 2017. So I've always been set up here with comics, but beforehand, the previous owner, Tim, I think he got a lot of his stock out, but you only have a certain amount of time before you get ushered out quickly in case there's another one.
Now, is Armageddon the highlight of your year?
It's one of the highlights, yeah. We really enjoy going to Armageddon and setting up a stall, and we like to see all the dressed up people in their cosplays. It's such an amazing time.
Well, you say it's one of the highlights. What are the others?
Yeah, so we've got a few events in our own store which are also really exciting. at the beginning of May, the first Saturday of May. It's Free Comic Book Day. And it's a globally recognised event where you go to your local comic book shop and there are free comics. We encourage people to dress up as well. And so we give people comics for just coming. We give people comics for dressing up as well. And then we usually have a sale on as well. And we all get dressed up as well, which people, our regulars, quite find amusing.
Do you operate a system at all where people can? It's a bit like hiring a comic, like you'd hire a DVD. So they come in, say, "Well, I'd like to read that." They pay you some money, read the comic, and then bring it back again. Or would that not work for your business?
It's not something we've thought about. It's an interesting concept.
Because the only reason I asked that is because the library question earlier on. Looking at the pictures of your store, you've got hundreds of titles in there, haven't you?
Yes.
Yeah, goodness me. Do you have much in the way of foreign language, or is it mostly in English?
Mostly English. Actually, I'd say it's all English. We do have a couple of books in Te Reo, but no other languages outside of
that's interesting.
What is recognised in New Zealand.
The Te Reo titles, are they mythical characters or contemporary, or how do they work?
So one book in particular, it's called Aotearoa Whispers. And the first half is in English, and the second half is in Te Reo. And the story follows a Māori boy who's learning about his heritage. And it's drawn by a Christchurch man. I'm having a blank of his name at the moment. But they are no longer in print. He couldn't get any more funding to keep printing his book. So we've got a handful here. And once they're gone, which is really sad. A lot of schools and a lot of libraries love the book.
Is that this graphic novel form or variations of it is very popular in Japanese culture, isn't it?
Yeah, it's called manga.
Ah, right. Do you have any of that?
Yes, we do. Yeah, we stock quite a few titles of manga.
Okay. Well, look, Kirsty, thank you very much for joining us this evening from Comics Compulsion. And just before we go, can you just remind us again whereabouts your shop is?
Yes, so 58 Main North Road in Papanui, opposite Northlands Mall.
Great stuff. That was Kirsty Everett from Comics Compulsion joining us here on After Dark. Thank you, Kirsty.
Thank you.